By now, I'm sure most of you have somewhat of a grasp of Dracula's actual non-fiction history. But today I want to discuss the Dracula we best know, the one we see in movies. Thank you to my patrons for keeping these caverns protected and full of inhuman life. Members will soon be added and brought on board as well. Dracula, believe it or not, is one of the most, if not the most used / reinvented characters in film. He's featured in over 110 movies, which, as you know with me and my listing videos, I'd be delighted to share here in a single episode. But time is limited, history of Dracula in film is the topic. But for your pleasure, I'll name most of these movies, as there are always those unsightly creepers. Scully here will help us out. Don't worry. Faster? Alright, you heard them, One Eye. Don't be irate. You can find this whole full list via a quick search of Dracula films on Wikipedia. While you're there, you may want to consider donating $1 for the years of free Rapido info. Dracula wasn't the first vampire to ever be featured in literature, and by far not the first in folklore. Published in 1987, Dracula by Bram Stoker was the igniting flame for this celebrity of the Monstrous. His fictional novel inspired Nosferatu, the first vampire movie, a silent film in 1992. If you're curious, as you may have heard this name before, such as in my video on all vampire types, Nosferatu translates from Old Romanian as vampire. And yes, this vampire was indeed a representation of Dracula, but as most, there are differences from their source material. And in this case, as also in many, the title doesn't obviously identify. Although knowing that Nosferatu is vampire, which was the title of Bram Stoker's English book, it actually does make obvious sense. In 1931, the first audio-supported Dracula movies came out. Yes, movies, as this was a duo. One in English, the other in Spanish. And that's where this Universal Studios, Bela Lugosi famous blood drinker, first emerged. Through the decades, various retellings of the story resurfaced on the silver screen, from animation to horror, from adventure to parody. It was in 1970 when Christopher Lee's Dracula's appearance of Count Dracula was depicted closest to the original literature, with him sporting the mustache. This movie as it stands is also one of 3 that are most faithful to the book, this one being the oldest of them. The others are Count Dracula 1977 and Dracula, often referred to as Bram Stoker's Dracula of 1992. For the highest rating, both the 1977 and 1992 releases score similarly, both above the older one, and for the closest in accuracy to the actual initial lore, I would recommend BBC's 1977 Count Dracula. It's a respectable film setting a more realistic stage. I would recommend Dracula 1992 as the most entertaining. This version stretches the story and monstrous appearances much further than the other two, as well as most of the more seriously toned Dracula flicks. Plus, it's 15 years newer, therefore able to utilize better technology. The werewolf and werbat forms replacing the wolf and bat only help to edge this movie onto all monster lovers' must-watch lists. As for Count Dracula 1970, I recommend it for Christopher Lee, who actually played the role 9 times. That, and again, it's an admirable production that tried much more than most of the dozens of retellings to stay true to the novel. The best rated on IMDb is Nosferatu. But if you choose to watch it, bear in mind It's probably the oldest movie you'll ever watch. But, and it's a big but, it features probably the creepiest of all the Dracula renditions until now. And that's a huge win for the film. Now, if you really just are in the mood for Christopher Lee, his 1958 Horror of Dracula is quite the better movie. On the other thing, if you're looking to laugh, a work of Mel Brooks and Leslie Nielsen, both whose work I'm fond of, particularly Leslie's, Dracula Dead and Loving It, 1995, is a comedic spin on this tale with all the production value. If you want that Nosferatu kick, but the antiqueness of the original just doesn't deliver, then Nosferatu the Vampire 1979 will, with all its death and beautiful imagery. If you're looking for something aged yet also very famous and that flows better with the modern you than Nosferatu, then you should give Dracula 1931 a shot and see what all the fusses was about. Different takes may not always be a bad thing. Dracula Untold 2014 has garnished quite a following of its own, and it's quite understandable, as the project wasn't taken very lightly at all. And if you're looking for something even newer, Netflix has taken upon a miniseries of just 3 episodes released in 2020, where Dracula and why he is the way that he is explored in a quality effort. And if it is more adventure and monstrosity, oh yes, monstrosity, that you seek, then Van Helsing 2004 will certainly tickle your fancy with one of the best Dracula bat form expressions out there, albeit via earlier CGI effects. I'd love to read which version of Dracula you enjoy the most and which movie stays closest to your being. I have been and will always be Monster Master Arthur. Stay tuned.